Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Today we're asking the question, has Roboute Guilliman gone too far in his remoulding of the Imperium? General spoiler warning to begin, as the events we're discussing today are from across the Warhammer 40k universe, so you have been warned. But with that said, let's just jump straight in. Now, ever since Roboute Guilliman returned to the current Imperium, he has obviously had the weight of mankind's survival upon his shoulders. It's an immense responsibility, and one that he undoubtedly realises, doing everything he can to try and save humanity. Such is the mental strain upon Guilliman. In the face of such insurmountable odds, his hair has even started to grey around the temples. Now, the effects of stress may be all too common to us mortals, but to the immortal Primarchs, that's something almost inconceivable. Guilliman is the Imperium's only hope, at least at the moment. And it would surely be only the most ardent of critics who would truly try and claim otherwise. However, critics, opponents, doubters the Primarch has. And an argument could be made that it's not the intention that Guilliman has that concerns most people, though undoubtedly it does some, but more how Guilliman is going about it. And maybe whether knowingly or not, Guilliman is going too far, perhaps traversing beyond that initial scope of victory. And so, well, that's what we're going to discuss now. Now, there was actually something very specific that caused this question to pop into my mind the other day, and I'll save that specific notion until last. So let's begin at the beginning, with the Primaris, the Ultima founding. This was a plan laid in place 10,000 years ago, and as far as we currently know, in complete secret, tasking Belisarius Cawl with the improvement of the Emperor's own design was surely a monumental challenge. But also a remarkable show of faith, as he actually gave Cawl access to the very secrets of the Primarch project. I'm not sure there's a more precious and valuable secret in the entire Imperium, and Guilliman simply handed it over. Of course, if he had absolute certain faith in Cawl, then there's no issue, but he certainly doesn't appear to right now, and has actually considered the thought that Belisarius could indeed become a problem one day that needs to be dealt with. In that case, I'd say handing Cawl access to these secrets wasn't just a leap of faith, it was a huge risk. One that thankfully hasn't backfired, at least yet. Now, the reception of these new Primaris was a shockwave, opposition breaking out across the Imperium, and notably within the Adeptus Astartes. Their presence has proved invaluable, helping to turn back the tides of chaos. But it's safe to say these new legions of Marines have caused Guilliman huge political problems, even having to end the first stage of the Indomitus Crusade because of it. And perhaps the first argument could be made here that there wasn't any real need to create the Primaris, that it's more just the weight of numbers than anything else that's really helped the Imperium turn back the tide. That an Ultima founding of firstborn Marines would have been just as good. And while that is unlikely to be the case with the Primaris' advancements, it certainly wouldn't have caused such a visceral opposition within the Astartes, and from the political players across the Imperium. That is for certain. They wouldn't have been legions of strange new creations of Khal and Guilliman. They would have been the Emperor's own avenging angels. Simply a new founding in a time of dire need. The doubts of a returned Primarch would have remained. The dark legends of the heresy are warning from history. But at least the founding of Firstborn Marines wouldn't quite have compounded it so much. Of course, we know the real-world tabletop reasons, but we're talking strictly in lore here. And I do think you could argue this was the first example of Guilliman taking an unnecessary step too far, causing himself a headache that wouldn't have been needed. Are the Primaris bigger and better? Yes, undoubtedly, but I think the argument could be made. Now, let's talk Guilliman's expansion of Ultramar. Since his return to the current Imperium, Guilliman has made no attempts to hide his disgust at what it's become. How the Imperial truth has been replaced by religion and superstition. How corruption has become embedded within the entire governing institution, or at least how it feels that way. And so he's decided to reclaim Astartes' control of the ancient Ultramar, expanding Ultramar from what it's been for the past 10,000 years, whether the people of those worlds like it or not. These are loyal Imperial worlds we're talking about here. Sure, some perhaps ruled by a corrupt, self-serving governor, but many, most even, are not. Most are simply loyal Imperial worlds going about their lives, contributing the required tithes to the Imperium at large. And yet they are given no choice. The Astartes are now in control. They find themselves consumed by the growing borders of Ultramar. Go check out the map of Ultramar in the Crusade or Heresy era. It was gargantuan, and now Guilliman is taking it back. Now Guilliman can claim this is in the Imperium's best interests, that it's part of his struggle to save mankind. But I think that's a much harder argument to make than the creation of the Ultima Founding. This could very easily be seen as self-serving, as Guilliman expanding Ultramar to claim the power for himself, for his chapter, for his sons. Once it's done, who's to say he'll stop there? If Ultramar becomes the jewel of the Imperium once more, what reason is there to not expand it further? It's yet another example, another argument that Guilliman is pushing boundaries, quite literally in this case, taking decisions that don't need to be taken. And this leads me on to the very topic that spurned this discussion in the first place. And minor spoiler warnings here for Sanguinius the Great Angel, as well as the Siege of Terra novel Echoes of Eternity. Within Echoes of Eternity, we get a brief glimpse of Sanguinius's first meeting with his father, the Emperor of Mankind. And as with most things regarding the siege, we're not going to talk about it in depth until after the series is finished, to give everyone a chance to read it for themselves. However, for today, the important piece of note is that Sanguinius only agrees to join his father if the Emperor agrees to leave the people of his world alone, as they are, as they have always been. To which the Emperor agrees, and within the novel Sanguinius the Great Angel, this is further continued. We're told how access to the Blood Angel's home system is prohibited, that the worlds of the system are intentionally kept the way they've always been, rad poisoning and lethal deserts to boot. Sanguinius even gives his reasoning for it, making it very clear that this is how Sanguinius would always want the people of Baal to be. Always, no debate about it. However, in knowing that now, we also know that Guilliman has broken that wish, that promise made by the Emperor. Back during the events of the novel Devastation of Baal, we know the Blood Angels faced the full wrath of Hive Fleet Leviathan. It required virtually all the Sons of Sanguinius's chapters to come together in defense of their ancient home, and they still very nearly lost. It was the arrival of Roboute Guilliman and the Indomitus fleet that finally proved enough to break the back of the Tyrannid Hive fleet. And it was in the aftermath of this victory that Guilliman immediately began enacting the next stage of his plan. The first was appointing the exhausted Dante as Warden of the Imperium Nihilus, de facto commander of everything left within the ruined northern half of the Imperium. And more importantly for today's discussion, something more personal for Baal. He charged Dante with changing his homeworld. These planets were hells. For generations we have recruited the strong over the weak, in the belief it makes our warriors better. I do not think this is so. Cruel men make cruel warriors, make cruel lords. We need to be better. We need to rise over the need for violence and recognize other human qualities in our recruits. Your chapter has ever understood this. And then later, it has long been in your capability to transform these worlds. Baal Primus is dead, but you need not let your remaining people suffer unnecessarily. Will they fight any better for dwelling on a world that kills them? By sacrificing their children to the Emperor's service, they have earned a better life. Once you have torn that blasphemy down, raise up the population of Baal Secundus. Teach them what we are fighting for. So Guilliman wants Dante to change Baal, to advance it, to civilize it, remove the red poisoned sky and deserts, and create cities of educated civilization, thus going completely against the one condition Sanguinius gave to the Emperor, the one requirement the Emperor had to agree to ensure his son's loyalty. Now, I'm not saying Guilliman is intentionally betraying his brother here. Of course he's not. It's incredibly unlikely Guilliman would have been aware of that bargain, nor do we know if he knew Sanguinius's opinion regarding his home. Although I do have to admit it is more likely he would have. But I'm not even doubting Guilliman's own intentions at all. He simply wants to bring civilization and enlightenment to every corner of the Imperium, limiting the law of the ruinous powers. But that's just the problem. You could very easily look at this as Guilliman converting Baal into Macragge, simply bringing his viewpoint, his philosophy, his way of life to everywhere else. He said it himself, I do not think this is so. It really does have hallmarks of the very reason that Lion L. Johnson didn't trust Guilliman. He simply can't rein in his ambition. First expanding the borders of Ultramar, vastly so, and now converting Baal from the Angel's own demanded state. Again, knowingly or not. If Sanguinius wanted Baal to be different, doesn't Guilliman think the Angel would have made it so? The same for all his brothers. Guilliman wants the Imperium to be akin to Ultramar, He wants to forge the Imperium in his own image, how he feels it should be. It's his nature. Summed up by Malcador, the fabled time the Emperor asked him what Guilliman's up to the other side of the Ruinstorm. It's Guilliman. He's building an empire. For me, all of this is outside the direct battle for survival, outside the war against chaos. Yes, Guilliman can reason it's not, and in some ways of course he's right, but I don't think in truth, in that deepest part of his subconscious, he's doing all of this to defeat chaos. I think he's doing it because it's simply his nature. It's what he was made to do. He can't help himself. He wants to craft and build the Imperium as he wants it to be. Ultramar. But in doing so, could you say he's taking a step too far? I think maybe you could. Because, as I said earlier, where is he going to stop? The inevitable next step is to roll out Astartes control across the entire galaxy, completely going against the most fundamental rule of the Emperor's intentions, that the mortal men and women of the galaxy were to govern themselves, that the advanced genetic creations of the Astartes, the Primarchs, especially the Primarchs, could simply never understand the concerns of humanity. Where is the next step of his civilization of other systems? Sanguinius would be aghast at Guilliman's changes to his home. His home. The one thing he requested from his father. The one concession the Emperor gave. And now here's Guilliman turning it into a Blood Angel themed Macragge. Again, the intentions are honourable, but I truly feel Sanguinius would make it abundantly clear it was not Guilliman's right to do so. It's hardly like Sanguinius is an uncaring brute akin to Angron. The Angel had his reasons. Just because Guilliman disagrees, it doesn't give him the right to change it. I think the Angel would be monumentally angry, something he may never forgive Guilliman for. I mean, where next? Jagatai's Chogoris, Vulcan's Nocturne, Russ's Fenris. It's a difficult one to consider. Guilliman is Lord Commander. It's up to him to rule as he sees fit. But can you imagine if Russ turned up and Guilliman was building a Macragge on Fenris? There's no two ways about it, it would be a beatdown for the ages. Guilliman may have expanded his brother's successor lines, but he's walking a very fine line if he meddles with their homes. One that could easily cause problems if one returned. And for me, therein lies the root of the problem. If one returned. Guilliman is alone. The only one of 18. Well, 20. The Primarchs were never meant to be alone. They were made to work together. To counteract each other. To balance their natures. Without his brothers to keep him in check, Guilliman, in all likelihood, simply will continue. Because that's just how he was made to be. He can't help himself. Has he crossed the line? Has he already gone too far? For me, ordering Dante to change Baal really is a step too far. Something that I think he would know Sanguinius would not be happy with. Perhaps we'll only ever truly know if one of his brothers returns. But as always everyone, what do you think? Do you feel that Guilliman has gone too far? Do you feel he has no right to order Dante to change Baal? Will Guilliman continue to implement Astartes' control of worlds outside the ancient borders of Ultramar? Will he use that success as a reason to do so? As always, leave your thoughts in the comments below, I love to read them. Huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. With that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.